is contagious!
Hi, and welcome to This is Contagious, a show where we look at how contagious ideas are shaping brands and culture. I'm Alex.
I'm Chloe.
And I'm Katrina.
Today, we're looking at brand collabs, how to use them as a shortcut to cultural relevance, and which brands are doing them well. Along the way, we'll be tracing a line from 17th century silk traders through Run DMC, all the way up to Pokemon, Crocs, and Meatball lollipops. But first, let's find out what's rocking the contagious world right now. Katrina, what's been contagious for you recently?
Well, it's all about athletics for me, Alex. A humanoid robot called Lightning has beaten the human world record for the half marathon in Beijing. Now, this robot completed the course in 50 minutes and 26 seconds. The human record, which was set by Uganda's Jacob Kiplimo, is 57 minutes and 20 seconds. So the robot basically kicked the arses of the humans. And that is extraordinary because this time last year, when the same competition was run, the performance of the robots was significantly worse than the human performance for that race. So this is an extraordinary step forward in robotics and automation, I guess.
I don't know. I'm going to be cynical here, but
Here we go.
You know I love to argue. So you're right. On the one hand, they did better than last year. But on the other hand, it was just a stunt for a Chinese phone company called Honor. And the thing is, we don't need faster robots. I don't think that is going to show progress. We already have cars. Like, why do we need robots to run faster? I think what we need is smarter robots capable of more human-driven tasks. Like, I want a robot that can take care of my kids, fold my laundry, put things away. I don't need a robot to run the marathon. And I am being a bit facetious. I am kind of joking, but I'm also not. There were a lot of robotics experts who were slightly rolling their eyes at this.
Well, given the choice of running a marathon and getting a robot to run it for me, I'll probably go with a robot. I guess these things are, it's just a demonstration of capability. It's like, if you can do that, then by extension, robots are capable.
Who knew Chloe was going to be so down on the robots? Just to put this in perspective, it is progress of a kind. Like
it is progress of a kind. I agree with that. Yeah.
The fastest robot to complete the race took more than 2.5 hours, and most of the robots in the field crapped out before the end of the race. These are autonomous robots. They're not being remote controlled, so they're performing this movement on their own and following the course. I get it. Yeah, it's quite a specific, carefully delineated task, but it's still quite hard.
Yeah, no, I know it's hard, but my point is that running a marathon is really hard for us as humans. What we need robots to do is do the things that are easy for humans, but hard, but onerous for us, annoying for us, and hard for robots to do. That will actually make a big change in where robotics is going.
That's a key thing in robotics. I think it's called the 3Ds. Get robots to do what's dirty, dull, or dangerous. Right, so that's really what you need to be training these things for. There's a little bit of a historical precedent for this stuff in terms of just kind of a pace of progress. So back in 2004, DARPA launched what's called the Grand Challenge, which was trying to get driverless cars to compete to navigate across the Mojave Desert, which is about 150 miles. The most successful vehicle made it 8 miles, and then, as Katrina said, crapped out. 6 years later, Google announced that a fleet of its autonomous cars had covered over 140,000 miles. There's a lovely quote from the book Race Against the Machine by the MIT scientists Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee, saying that, this is the world we're living in now, where, capability passes from the realm of science fiction into the everyday world, not over the course of a human lifetime or even the span of a professional's career, but in just a few years. And that's, I think, why this is contagious. That's what we're seeing, is it's an example of the rate of progress visualized in a way that people can understand.
Yeah. And what was interesting to me about the actual sort of circumstances of the race itself was, in previous years, there's been an awful lot of like crowds jeering at the silly robots and how useless they are. The laughter is dying down now. Even though there are still some quite unsettling incidents.
They're still falling about.
Hush now, Chloe. There's like a clip of one of the robots, for example, veering off course, like striding into one of the crash barriers and just trying to keep going as though it was like going for an audience member. And so a handler comes up from behind, grabs it and kind of bodily removes it to a support truck. And it's quite a kind of weirdly disturbing moment, because you get a glimpse into the sort of troubling, unstoppable nature when things don't quite go right, like Wallace and Gromit in the wrong trousers when the mechanical device goes a bit rogue.
So I think all we really need now is a robot handler and a robot audience, and then we don't even have to worry about these things at all. On which note, shall we hear from our sponsor?
This is the sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Contagious IQ. Yes, we sponsor our own show. Contagious IQ is an intelligent platform that helps brands and agencies supercharge their marketing by learning from the world's most creative brands and campaigns, as well as the most influential trends. If you want to craft better strategies, come up with more creative ideas, and generally create work that's going to put a dent in culture, just search Contagious IQ to find out more. Okay, that's the hard sell over. Let's get back to the show.
So today we're talking about collaborations, those wonderful mashups that happen when brands get friendly with each other. I think my favourites tend to be the really, really weird ones. Kat, do you have a particularly favourite weird collaboration?
Definitely hits the weird criteria. It's maybe not my favorite, but I'm always struck by the weirdness of Porsche collaborations, the car brand. They did this collaboration with the Smeg home electronics brand, famous for making lovely retro fridges and freezers. But this collaboration focused on smaller appliances like toasters, and just the dissonance of the sexy Porsche brand doing a really, really like sleek toaster blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, I've never felt my toaster is either under-engineered or too slow. Chloe, do you have a favourite bizarre collab?
Well, my favorite one hasn't actually launched yet, but it is the IKEA Chupa Chups Meatball lollipop, which is coming this summer. I can't wait. I'm not sure if I'm delighted or horrified, maybe a bit of both. And my favorite thing about this is that IKEA was too scared to actually launch this in Sweden. So it's launching in almost every IKEA market around the world except for Sweden. I think they thought the Swedes would be offended at this bastardization of their meatball.
Probably a good call. I like the fact that Chupa Chups strategy is just like, if you can stick it on a stick, we'll do the collab.
Why not?
Are they going to wrap it in those like fiendishly difficult to unwrap wrappers, or is that?
I think we'll have to wait to see.
You really got to get your fingers on the meat. I think my sorry for that. I think my bizarre collab is probably Velveeta, which is a prepared cheese product. So sorry. They collabed with a celebrity jeweler, George the Jeweler, and together they made a piece of jewellery which was a 14-carat gold lip cuff designed to look like a drip of melted cheese hanging for your mouth, and it was yours for the bargain price of $77.
Unbelievably attractive. Hello, ladies, with the cheese dripping down your lip.
Do you want to hear some contenders for what the first ever collaborations were? So a couple of contenders. You can pick which one you think is actually best meets the criteria. So back in the 1920s, you got Betty Crocker and Gold Medal Flour. If someone's about to cry foul, Betty Crocker was not a real person, spoiler alert. She's entirely fictitious brand mascot. If we go back even further, back into 1765, you've got Wedgwood Pottery and Queen Charlotte, wife of King George III, who collabed on a tea set, which was the kind of thing that set pulses racing back in the 1700s, I suppose.
That's real sort of brand ambassador kind of scoop for Wedgwood right there, I think.
Yeah. And if you really want to stretch the definition, in the early 1600s, you've got the East India Company, who I suspect most people know from the Pirates of the Caribbean films as the villain of the piece, and the Mughal Empire, who collabed to make chintz, so beloved of European royalty and your grandparents. Kat, so that's like kind of the deep history of, I say, the sort of deep history of collaboration. What's the more recent history of collabs that kind of brought us to where we are today?
I think if we go back to the 80s, we can look to the world of music for the more recent history of collaborations. We saw Queen and David Bowie release Under Pressure in 1981 to become a massive global hit. But 2026 is actually the 40-year anniversary of Aerosmith and Run DMC's Walk This Way. That was a huge phenomenon, not least because MTV was playing that video 2 times an hour at its peak. So like we can think of music as this sort of creative collaborative world anyway, but what started quite organically in that context has quickly become something much more strategic in that industry. It's a shortcut to a wider audience and more exposure. And what it boils down to really is this idea that two audiences are always going to be better and more profitable than just one.
There's a really interesting interview with Rick Rubin, I think on the Rick Beato YouTube channel, where he talks about how he, so Rick Rubin recorded, produced Walk This Way with Run DMC and Aerosmith. He said at the time he was a huge fan of rap and hip hop, and he kind of persuaded Aerosmith to come in and do this collab. But once they'd made it and it was getting played on radio, rock radio stations were getting people calling in saying, take that crap off the air. But then 1 week later, it had become the most requested song, which really goes to show the power of collabs to reach new audiences and to influence people, and I think to cross-pollinate cultures.
Yeah, and that power is incredibly evident in some of the stats around this kind of stuff. According to The Economist, by 2018, the music industry in general had seen a 30% increase in collaborations versus the 1990s. And more recent research on the Billboard Hot 100 shows that collaborations have gone from being a relative niche at 10% in the late 90s to roughly half of all hits today. That is really, really something.
Kind of standard practice. Right.
Standard practice, and just like a no-brainer now. Fashion obviously has been taking notes while all this has been going on. In the UK, we saw Topshop starting to collaborate with young designers in 2003, but H&M really kind of upped the ante with their first high fashion collaboration with Karl Lagerfeld in 2004. Louis Vuitton, Takashi Murakami handbags were this beautiful high fashion art world crossover in the early 2000s as well. That sort of elevated it into much more of a cultural event. We've seen Supreme collaborating with Louis Vuitton as well, raising things up another level in terms of hype and the resale madness that now kind of settles around these events. So what we're seeing is that I guess music has been the blueprint for the art of collaborating, but the fashion world sort of scaled all of this up into a much more industrial level. That's where we saw collaborations beginning to step into their power as a marketing machine and a cultural spectacle.
Since then, we've very much seen it move into the realm of the wider entertainment industry, haven't we?
I would say that the Lego movie was really a pivotal moment for this that propelled the future of brand collabs. It proved the value of brands loosening their reins by putting their characters in unexpected scenarios. So the Lego movie, when it launched in 2014, was able to feature characters from other universes. So you had, Batman, and you also had characters from Star Wars. And this is all because of existing licensing deals that Lego had.
Yeah, there was like Lord of the Rings characters, there was Harry Potter characters in there. It was the entirety of pop culture basically came into that movie, right?
Exactly. But I think what it showed for other brands watching was how exciting it is for audiences when these worlds collide. And I think it really normalized brand to brand collaboration. And it also gave brands outside the entertainment space confidence to take this leap when it came to their own brands, and also prove the power of what happens when you loosen your grip on IP and you actually loosen your reins and control on your brand, and how positive this can be.
Yeah, the author Matt Ridley talks about creativity being, in inverted commas, what happens when ideas have sex. And it feels like collabs give you that what-if factor when brands have metaphorical sex.
Yeah, and it sort of legitimizes the collaboration. I think quite often people see collaborations as kind of an easy answer to the sort of sales in the next quarter. But that kind of stamp of creative legitimacy is really, really interesting. If you see it through that lens, collaboration is the height of creativity.
And obviously, collaborations themselves are not new, going back to the East India Company, obviously. But I think the marketing world saw a real inflection point in 2023, and all the collaborations that were used to promote the Barbie movie, right? So there was Barbies like real life Malibu dream house that you could rent on Airbnb. There was a Barbie car in Forza. There was a Barbie x Crocs collab. There was a Barbie capsule collection in Zara. Like, and the sum total of it meant that if you had a pulse or you cast a shadow, you knew there was a Barbie movie going on that year. But I think what was different then, the reason it was an inflection point, was the scale of it. The CMO of Barbie told us that the brand did 165 collabs. and kind of almost regardless of the quality of any individual collab, because some of them were more interesting, better than other. The sheer volume was remarkable. The volume was PR worthy in and of itself. And about a year later, I think Wicked pulled the same tactic. They tried about 70 or 80 collabs, arguably with less success, do we think?
Yeah, I do think. And I think there was a tremendous appetite for almost all of the Barbie collaborations, with the possible exception of the weird pink sauce that Burger King released in Brazil. I don't think there was the same appetite for the Wicked collaboration-a-thon. It doesn't have the same kind of breadth and depth of cultural history as Barbie does. You know, if we're talking about Barbie, we're looking back to the 1950s, the 1960s for the development of that brand. Wicked just isn't as storied and resonant globally, I don't think, yet. And so it had a harder kind of job to do in terms of scaling its own roster of collaborations.
One of the worst Wicked collabs that I saw was Wicked cleaning products. I mean, nobody needs that in their life. It was like a collab between P&G. And so you could get like pink or green, you know, Febreze or Swiffers. I think they just thought that, oh, if Barbie made everything pink, we can make everything pink and green. And like you say, Katrina, they didn't have that brand recognition to be able to do that. They didn't have that permission.
I think the point here is you can't take collaborations for granted. You can't assume that you can do anything and that it's going to land. I think my favorite example of a brand really misjudging that decision is the launch of the Apple iPhone 6, where they collaborated with the band U2 to install U2's new album, Songs of Innocence, onto 500 million iTunes accounts unilaterally without asking permission from any of those users first. People took massive, massive umbrage at that. It was not the moment of surprise and delight they were anticipating at all. So just a huge miscalculation.
An act of musical aggression on the part of U2.
Totally.
It seems to be the general take on it at the time.
Compulsory Bono.
Yeah, they forced it down people's throats. They weren't providing it as an option.
Also, like, you know, some collabs just don't land quite the way they are expected to. I think a recent example of that we can see with the hookup between Tiffany and Nike. Now, on paper, that looks like an absolute gift. It's a match made in heaven. What could possibly go wrong? But the shoe that they released was so, like, brutally underwhelming to people that it really, like, clunked into culture at a time when AI had just become available to people, generative AI, and they were using it to make all these incredibly kind of outlandish, interesting versions of this potential collaboration that just showed up how dull the real life one actually was.
I think for me, it comes back to that Matt Ridley thing. It's like the ideas having sex, it's the brands having the metaphorical sex. It's the what if factor of like, oh, wow, if we put this brand and this brand together, what are we going to get? And in your head, when someone tells you it's Tiffany and Nike, you set your expectation very high because of who they are. And the output was just very, very underwhelming.
But that's actually not the point. I think it goes much further than this. People weren't just thinking what if in their heads. They were actually using Gen AI platforms like Midjourney to create the what if. And the actual creations that these AI artists were coming up with were so much better than the very boring black sneakers that Tiffany and Nike produced.
It sort of dented their reputation for creativity and excellence, didn't it? Because it just didn't come up to snuff.
These fake AI brand collabs are especially popular when it comes to luxury brands. So actually, Tiffany and Nike created something in the end, even though it didn't live up to expectations. But what we're seeing online is what this creative director has called luxury fan fiction. So they're bringing these luxury brands with other brands or maybe with entertainment properties, and just it's total fantasy. They're making these products that don't exist. One of my favorites that would really viral is a Loewe and Stanley Cup collab. Leather Stanley Cups. It doesn't even make sense. I don't even think it's possible. But that's the point. They're pushing the boundaries with what is physically possible. And I also think that because there are no brand managers involved, there's no one out there saying this doesn't follow our guidelines. You get these really amazing creations that are really fantastical.
So everyone's doing collabs, lots of collabs happening out there. But can you spot a real collab amongst a load of fictional collabs if we play the game of Spot the Collab.
Spot the collab.
Okay, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to give one of you 4 possible collabs. 3 of them are fake. 1 of them is real. You've got to spot the real collab. So, Chloe, I'm going to come to you first. And I've got collaborations from the worlds of condiments and fashion. So, here's the 4 possibles. Only one of them is real. Is the real one Kikkoman soy sauce and Uniqlo? Is it Hellman's mayo and Levi's? Is it Heinz ketchup and Kate Spade? Or is it Frank's hot sauce and Ted Baker?
I'm going to go the first one.
Kikkoman soy sauce and Uniqlo. Satisfyingly, you're entirely wrong. It's Heinz and Kate Spade who did a limited edition accessory collection, turning Heinz ketchup iconography into fashion goods such as bags, apparel, and lifestyle items.
Man, now I'm nervous about what my set are going to be.
Yeah, Katrina, here we go. Spot the collab. And with you, we're going to go with luxury and gaming. 4 possible collabs, only one of them is real. Louis Vuitton and League of Legends, Gucci and Call of Duty, Prada and Fortnite, or Dior and Minecraft.
I'm going to go with the first one. Was it Vuitton and League of Legends?
You are correct. So you have beaten Chloe.
So unfair. I knew that one.
Anyone can say that now. So do you want to hear what they did? They made in-game skins, trophy case collaboration, which included character outfits and digital cosmetics, which does sound like a weird stretch for the League of Legends milieu.
I don't know. I think, they're trying to consider all possible gamers. I think that's creditable.
Okay, should we have a little bit of a look into why we think this is happening? What's kind of the drivers of this trend and why collabs are currently everywhere? I think one of the key reasons for this, certainly from a brand point of view, is that no one has the media budget to buy attention in the way that they used to years ago. So in the UK, back in like the early noughties, if you had like £1 million media spend, you could reach about 40 to 50% of the population, right? The same media spend now would get you maybe 10 to 15%. Throw that over to the US, $1 million media budget. Back in the noughties, you could maybe reach about 12% of the population. Now it's more like 2 or 3%. So it's costing you a lot more to reach the same amount of people, or you just can't reach as many people as before. And of course, back in the noughties, it doesn't seem that long ago, but media was still really just TV, print, radio, out of home. It wasn't till around 2006, 2007 that the majority of people had broadband in their homes. iPhone launches similar time, so it takes a couple of years to get smartphone penetration. Now, fast forward to the current day, you've got all the TV, you've got the music streaming services, you've got social, podcasts, you've got people spending time in environments that it's really hard to advertise in, like messaging and gaming. And even if you can find your audience, the fight for attention is Darwinian. There's like over 190 years worth of video uploaded to Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube every single day. So like the analogy would be that back in the day, it's like you used to be able to just put up one billboard on a road in town that everyone was passing by. Now you've got to put adverts up on infinite side streets and hope that people are going down them.
What these collabs do is they help brands reach new audiences. So when they don't have the attention of the whole world, they're able to get the attention of another brand's fandom. It's basically the cross-pollination of tribes. It's bringing 2 different fandoms together and then showing how aligned they are. And it's also, when there's not a lot of attention, it's bringing the attention of one brand to shine a light on another. Basically, I think the point here is that brand collabs show that the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, I think we could see that with the Barbie stuff. They deliberately sought out collaborations that were in industries where the brand had not previously played, and partnerships designed to appeal to all ages, all gendered. They really kind of maximized the surface area of the fandom. There's a lovely quote from Lisa McKnight, who is the head of brand at Mattel, who came and spoke at one of our Contagious events, who said that once the fandom took hold of it, it became its own marketing ecosystem. I think that's the power of collabs. It gives people something to get excited about, not just something you want them to buy.
I think also when it came to Barbie, what they're also showing was how Barbie was a brand that was relevant to all these different groups. I mean, that's exactly what you're saying. They were going after a whole different category of goods and proving as a brand that has been known to be a toy brand, how their appeal is beyond kids and just making Barbie a culturally relevant brand beyond that very specific sector.
What that shows us is that there is massive, massive value in not being obvious. We are biologically wired as human beings to pay attention to things that are new and are different. You maybe have heard of the von Restorff effect, a term that was coined in 1933 by the German psychiatrist Hedwig von Restorff. It basically means that in any group of similar things, we're much more likely to notice and remember the one thing that is different, the odd one out. So unexpected collaborations take advantage of that effect. They catch our attention precisely because they are not business as usual.
So all that kind of wacky stuff we were talking about at the start, it's not just wacky for the sake of being wacky. It's wacky because it actually works, right?
That's it, exactly. A researcher called Jessica Vredenberg talks a lot about the value of what she describes as optimal incongruence, which basically means taking pains to think about creating just the right amount of unexpectedness. Because when it comes to capturing people's attention, nailing that decision is what makes people stop and think and notice harder. That's what sparks questions, and that's what gets people talking and sharing. Now, in the world of brands, creating incongruence and doing unexpected things sometimes gets shut down because nervous executives see it as causing confusion. You're expecting one thing and you're getting another. What the fuck, you know? But honestly, it's exactly that dissonance that makes people pay attention. It's delivering salience for your brand, which is what every marketer is fighting for right now.
I guess at a corporate level as well, you have what's drummed into you so much is like you have your brand guidelines, you have the things that you can definitely do, you have lines across which you may never cross. It's drilled into you the importance of distinctive brand assets, all this stuff, and then to go, yeah, but actually you need to do something kind of quite far over that line in quite a wacky way. That is effective as well. It kind of goes against the grain of a lot of the muscle memory you've built up, I suppose.
There is another element, I think, when it comes to incongruence, which is we're seeing the most boring brands in the world partnering with really, really cool brands. So if you take Supreme, obviously an expert at collabs, they did a partnership with Colgate on toothpaste. I mean, can you think of anything more boring? And yet it managed to capture people's attention. Another one of my really favorite, very, very boring collabs is the streetwear brand Vetements and DHL. I mean, DHL is a logistics brand, for Pete's sake. Like, can you think of any sector that is duller? But because you have this incongruence, all of a sudden...
Harsh on the logistics sector.
Hey, someone has to say it, right?
That's not controversial, Alex. Come on.
I don't think it is. But it's because it's so boring that it stands out. It's that juxtaposition of the very, very cool and the very, very dull that makes people pay attention.
I think another reason that we're seeing so many collabs and why brands are latching onto them, they're getting so much mileage out of them, is it's kind of a shortcut to cultural relevance. You get to play in someone else's playground without having to build all those brand associations from scratch. And it's got built-in storytelling. Like, if you're a Heineken or a Heinz ketchup type of brand, your product has basically never changed for 100 years. You're always having to look for new routes into storytelling. A collab is a story in and of itself. So journalists and creators, cover collaborations, I think, disproportionately because they're inherently kind of story shaped. They're easy to explain. So if you're a creator and you make content about footwear, or a creator making content about fast food, then Crocs does a collab with KFC. That content just makes itself. It's so easy for those media type outlets to cover it and create content on your behalf and spread the story for you.
Yeah, for sure. I do think with this cultural relevance, though, you can see the work that these brands have done before they were doing all these collabs. Like if you take Heinz, for example, they were proving themselves to be a culturally relevant brand. And then the partnerships just took it to the next level. The same thing with Mattel and Barbie. I don't think they could have done all these collabs if they haven't spent years and years changing their brand and proving how it was a modern brand. You can't just start from zero.
Obviously, we're talking a lot about brand, but which brands do we think are doing it really well?
Well, I think we can't really talk about collaboration without talking about the Supreme brand. These guys have made collaboration absolutely core to their business, but never in a way that feels aggressive. it's always an expression of what this brand cares about, and it's an expression of its point of view. They have absolutely nailed the business model that kind of goes around this and helps drive the commercial machine of their organization as well. The regularity of their collaborations sets up expectation and anticipation for each new partnership, whether it's with Kermit the Frog or Comme des Garçons. They've absolutely nailed the business model, the idea of drop culture, where they're releasing small quantities of product at very precise times. That is turning every single collaboration that they do into an event. The limited supply guarantees sellouts, which helps to drive the hype machine, but also it naturally limits the danger of them becoming overexposed. Nothing ever has a chance to get overexposed or feel stale at Supreme. They're always on point with that.
It seems that, collaborations are really core to the Supreme business. Do you feel like, is it a stretch to say that the brand couldn't exist without collabs?
I think it could exist without collabs, but it would never have grown into the success story that it is today. It was sold a few years ago to a major investor, the company that owns Ray-Ban sunglasses, for untold quantities of money. And that would never have been like a useful business decision to take if they hadn't put in the hard yards to grow their brand with collaborations. And I think what it really speaks to is the incredibly sort of nuanced relationship that this brand has with its audience, the people that it's selling to. The founder of Supreme, James Jebbia, is on the record saying that he thinks the reason that they do things the way they do there is because they respect the customer. And I think if you don't do that with your collaborations, if you don't set out with that kind of fundamental desire to delight and amaze your audience front of mind, then you're setting yourself up for something underwhelming.
That's such an interesting point. I think when people talk about collabs, it's rare to hear customer centricity come across as a point. It's a lot of look at the PR value we're getting out of this. Very rarely talked about in terms of we're delivering something for the customer here. I think another brand that does it really well, has done it consistently really well, is Pokemon. I think they've got a really interesting challenge as well. So if you think they launched, not a million miles away from Supreme, they launched 1996. And basically, they've had to fight for relevance for the last 30 years, where contemporaries that were around at the same time, like Furbies, Beanie Babies, long since fizzled out, right? I think, and one of the ways it gets that relevance is through collabs. I think some of my favorite Pokemon collabs I've listed out here. North Face and Gucci, they did branded outfits in the mobile game Pokemon Go. McDonald's turned 13,500 of their restaurants into Pokemon Go Pokestops and gyms. They did a Tiffany capsule collection, Pikachu, Jigglypuff, and Mew.
Those are so ugly. They're hideous.
Well, they're also not cheap. $29,000 each for your ugly, subjectively, collab there. They did a handbag collab with Longchamp. They did a collab with the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, where they had paintings of Pokemon in the style of Van Gogh to help bring younger people towards the artist. My last and favourite collab was a collab they did with Le Creuset, slightly high-end kitchenware brand, where they produced cast iron casserole dishes and kettles, around about $250 a pop for those. And I think what strikes me about all this is, one, the variety of the range of people they're collabing with, but also in a way the accessibility. So some of this stuff is effectively free, like the North Face stuff in Pokemon Go. Some of it is nearly $30,000. But all of it is keeping a 90s kids game relevant, and a lot of it appeals to adults now without excluding kids at the same time.
The collaboration with Le Creuset is the single most delightful thing I have seen all year. It made me so happy. And yeah, these are expensive items of cookware, but there's just a brilliant kind of insight there. Like the original colorways that Le Creuset cookware was available in is things like volcanic orange. So it feels like a brilliantly kind of clear through line from volcanic orange to Pikachu yellow in your amazing heavy cast iron casserole dish.
There's also an amazing Darth Vader Le Creuset. Looks very cool too.
What colour's that?
What do you think?
Chloe, what about you? Is there any particular brand? I know we've talked about a lot of brands, but is there any particular brand for you that really stands out as being, a brand to look to when it comes to effective, interesting collabs?
Yeah, I think Skims is a great example. And I think people are too quick to dismiss Skims as just Kim Kardashian's brand and not actually appreciate the amazing strategy that has gone into making it a huge shapewear disruptor. So what they have done from their very beginning is do all these limited edition collections with really high-end brands like Fendi or Dolce & Gabbana. And this has transformed the brand from a shapewear brand or an underwear brand into a legitimate luxury product, making it feel much more high-end. And it's done a similar thing in the sports space. So it's done ski wear with the North Face and workout wear with Nike. And these partnerships give the brand much more credibility than if Skims had just done its own sportswear collections. So it's allowing the brand to venture into new sectors, and also very similar to what you were just saying about Pokemon, Alex, it makes the brand much more aspirational by partnering with these premium brands.
Yeah, also it underlines the sort of the performance credentials of Skims as well in a way that's really, really hard to dismiss, right?
For sure.
Other brands that are absolutely nailing it when it comes to collaborations, we have to talk about Crocs, right? This is a brand that has used collaborations to absolutely transform the fortunes of its brand. It's gone from being the punchline of a joke to being a footwear that has absolutely universal relevance and a real sense of personality and confidence and wit as well. Now, the folks at Crocs say that a successful collaboration needs to be a little bit controversial, but not too controversial. And then it needs to be clear that your voice is all embracing, not judging. That was certainly true, absolutely from the very first collaboration that put Crocs back on the map. That was with the fashion designer Christopher Kane in 2016, when he put bejeweled Crocs on the catwalk. And the debate that stirred up at the time, the outrage that people felt about that was the very beginning of this brand's turnaround. Since then, this company has worked with everyone from Post Malone to KFC. Oh my God, those Crocs with like a chicken drumstick as a gibbet, like dumped on the top of the shoe. And I think as the idea of like comfort became much cooler after the pandemic, those associations with these key cultural figures, they've been like brand rehab for Crocs, you know?
Crocs of itself is a very interesting brand. When Mike Judge was making the film Idiocracy, the kind of the satire about the state of intelligence in the future, they were trying to find like what they thought would be the stupidest clothes anyone would wear in a future full of idiots. And Crocs had just been released. And at the time, Mike Judge said, we looked at them and thought, they look so dumb. This product is never going to take off. We'll make everyone in the film wear what were Crocs at the time. And then he said, looking back, like, how wrong could we be?
Who's dumb now?
Okay, should we see if we can summon up some takeouts for brands looking to get involved in the optimally incongruent world of collaborations?
Yeah, I would say that my takeouts are that there are so many reasons why brands might experiment with collabs. It gives brands credibility, it allows them to venture into new spaces and attract new audience. But I really think the biggest reason that brands should think about doing collabs is because they're a shortcut to cultural relevance. People judge you for the people that you hang out with, the people you associate with, and the same is true for brands. By associating with newer and cooler brands or brands from different sectors or brands from other areas, it just makes you change what you think about those brands and makes them more culturally relevant.
Yeah, I think my takeout would be, it's a little bit of a watch out, I guess, in a way, is that a collaboration doesn't really create an identity, it just redistributes your existing one. So you actually need a strong, well-established identity in order to confer meaning onto the collaboration without diluting your existing brand. You've still got to put in the hard yards of reasonably traditional marketing before you're allowed to kind of go off and do a collab, else you've got nothing really to bring to that table.
And I think for me, the takeaway from all of this comes back to that James Jebbia quote that I mentioned earlier, this idea of respecting your customer. Like, we're living in an environment right now where collabs are becoming like a norm of marketing and culture. So that means you have to be absolutely on your game when it comes to sort of diagnosing what the right collaboration for you is going to be. The public has an unbelievable nose for marketing bullshit and marketing manipulation that is purely commercially calculating and motivated. So I think unless you have a really healthy sense of sort of good intention when it comes to genuinely delighting your audience, you're really going to fall flat on your face. Don't be afraid as well to be controversial and to be divisive and to be really specific about the audience that you're talking to, because any sort of pushback that you stir up only makes the whole conversation more interesting and more shareable ultimately. And that is really the whole point, right?
If you want to know a bit more about some of the things we've covered today, Mattel's Chief Brand Officer, Lisa McKnight, gave a talk about Barbie and the movie collabs at our Most Contagious event, and you can watch that video on Contagious IQ. Contagious IQ is also the place where you'll find in-depth features on Pokemon, on Skims, and on Crocs. The Rick Rubin interview is called The Rick Rubin Interview, and it's on Rick Beato's YouTube channel. Matt Ridley's 2010 TED Talk is called When Ideas Have Sex, and that's also available on YouTube. Wicked is no doubt available on streaming services, but just don't look for it in the cleaning products aisle. For myself, Katrina and Chloe, we hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time.